Hi, today we're going to take a look at the N64HD. It's a HDMI modification developed by Gamebox.systems, and this is an internal digital to digital kit that enables HDMI direct output from the Nintendo 64. It supports resolutions of 240p, 480p, 720p and 1080p resolutions. I paid £129 for this in the UK. I think that really goes for about $110 in the US. Once I've installed the N64HD, we're going to be comparing it to the RAD2X. Just do a few comparisons and things like that later on. So we're going to look at the background, the parts from this mod, and then I'm going to be doing the actual install and some tests. Then we're going to get on to playing some games, nice thorough game test just to make sure it actually works. And then the final thing is the verdict, just to see how it compares to the RAD2X and whether it's a worthy conversion. So what we're first going to be taking a look at is the website, Gamebox.systems. I bought this directly from them. It's been on pre-order for quite a while, so it's finally turned up. This is what you get in the kit. You basically get the main motherboard, a little daughter board that houses the HDMI actual interface and connection, a couple of ribbon cables. There we go, that's a picture of the little daughter board installed. That's obviously off their main website. The version you get is slightly different. There's the ribbon cable going into the main board, so it's a very nice and tidy add-on, a nice tidy little addition to the N64. So I'm going to get straight into this and get the top off the N64 so we can start this install. Nothing unusual here, just a bit of a rag just to stop me scratching the top of this. I'm gone with my, decided to go with this green see-through case that I got from America when I was on holiday. So this is actually an NTSC unit. Normal game bit screwdriver needed to remove the shell from the N64. Nothing complicated, been done 1,000 times. Beauty of this mod is that it fits onto the top of the heatsink, so there's no fancy soldering direct to the board. It's classed as an intermediate to expert install. I can see why. There's a little QSB flex cable that allows easier installation, obviously, to the main chip, the graphics chip, where the digital information is extracted and then sent to the N64 digital. So just some normal Phillips screws hold the heatsink to the main board. We'll just get those popped out. It's a nice fanless design, it's a nice neat design. I've always liked the N64. I think it was all very well engineered and designed. It could have done with a little bit more extra RAM and stuff like that out the box, but I knew they were really trying to keep the price of this down. I just need to flip that over just to make sure the heat conductive pads have survived, just make sure I haven't got to replace those. The board won't come out yet. There's I think 4 more screws that actually hold there on the actual ports, so we'll get those popped out. Then the main board will pop out. We'll take out the port. There's a little port, external port, that clips into the back, which you are going to exchange for one that comes in the kit. As whenever you take one of your consoles apart, it's always a good opportunity to have a look round, just make sure there's no cap leakage or no batteries or anything like inside that could be causing damage. The last thing you want to do is this conversion and then 6 to 12 months later the unit dies because of an internal capacitor issue or something like that. So what we're going to do is get these little bags open. So there's your little flex cable that you connect to the chip. You've got a little double-sided tape if you decide to mount that board without screwing it down. There's a mounting board for the HDMI little daughter board. There's the little cutlass mod. That little there just houses all of your and encases all of your outputs from the N64, which is quite a nice little touch. I think it's nicely and quality 3D printed, so I'm quite happy with that. That's a little adapter board that you screw your HDMI output board onto. A few screws, so best not lose them. Open the next bag and there's the main board itself and the little daughter board, all in their anti-static bags. I do like to get everything out. The amount of times I've done a mod, got halfway through and realised I haven't got all the parts, so I always tend to get everything out of the bag and have a good look round, make sure I've got everything in place. there's no damage to the console, and it's a good time to start the actual main part. This is the worst part of the mod. Not that I've really had any problems ever doing this type of soldering. It's just being slow and steady. I wouldn't say I'm actually any mega expert, but a nice, relaxed, steady hand, and knowing what you're doing. I suppose you've got to know what you're doing and have the kit to do it properly. A nice soldering iron, lots of flux. I think the most important thing here is a nice amount of flux. The little cable sits on pin 6. It is marked. The end of the cable is marked to identify pin 6, so all you have to do is count up to 6 and make obviously a parallel connection to that number pin 6. So that's what I'm doing here, is just counting up to pin 6, making very certain that I have definitely got pin 6, because once this is in place, you're going to do well to get it off without breaking it. You can buy these separate, if they do make these separate, just in case you do balls it up. But I think if you're very slow and steady, you know, you shouldn't have a problem. So all we're doing is offering that cable up against, and offering it literally nice and snug up against the connections, and then tinning a couple of connections. That's all we're trying to do. Just getting it to tack it in place, just so that there's no movement of the cable and it's all lined up in parallel and nice. So most important thing here is plenty of flux. Nothing will flow, nothing will join very well unless you've got a nice bed of flux there. Don't have to put tons of solder on. As you can see, my soldering iron's only a very small tip and it's not loaded. I'm primarily using pretty much what is already on those pins. I will add a touch more solder later on, just to increase the thickness and help strengthen those connections, but initially I'm just using the solder that's actually on those chip pins, just to get that nicely tacked in place. After you've done that, depending on what version of motherboard you've got, you connect into this particular point. This is version 8 motherboard, so this is the connection I need to make from here to the USB cable. So a nice blob of solder, a little bit of tannalised wire, just anything really, as long as it's a good quality wire, anything will do. You didn't get this in the box, which I was quite surprised, but it's not really any major problem. Need to connect it to the left of the two pads, those two gold plated pads, the one that's got control on it. But all the instructions are housed on their website, so there's no room for error. Once you've tinned that pad up, just grab your wire and gently solder into place. Not too much heat, don't have to spend too much time there. You can damage these flexes if you overheat them, so just a little dab, then nicely tidy the wire up just to get everything nice and tidy. So everything's going so good so far. Just a bit of housekeeping there, just to run the wires just out the way slightly. I don't want them rubbing on anything or catching or chafing on any of the heatsink or anything. I'm now going over the main connection, just to make sure I've got no bridge contacts. So it's well worth, if you're going to be doing this sort of work, it's well worth you having some form of oscilloscope or magnifying glass, just so you can check your work afterwards, just to make sure you've done no damage to the chip, none of the pins are dry or not made any good contact. So just going around all my connections, just making sure that everything's where it should be and it's a nice firm contact. So I'm really pleased with that, that's all good. So once all that's done, I'm just going around to all my connection points, I'm just giving it a nice clean up. Don't really want any flux residue on there. To be fair, it's pretty much downhill from now on. This little plastic base just makes a connection to hold this circuit board into the body and make sure it's nicely jammed into the connection. So that's what your two little screws are for, just to connect this little plate to your HDMI port. Again, this is pretty much the hard bit's done now, it's just basically reassembling it. This took me, I would say it probably took me 20-25 minutes probably to complete this mod from start to finish, so it's not a massively horrible time. That once that QSB cable's done, it is literally all downhill from now. So I'm really pleased so far how it's gone. All the connections are good, I've all checked them with the oscilloscope, so I'm really pleased and happy to carry on now to make sure everything else is okay. So this step, we need to attach the little ribbon cable that comes with the kit that goes into this little board. We'll just get that connected. A little cantilever there that needs clicking in. was quite dusty in there, so I tended to give it a little dusty. With that in place, it all acts a bit like a sandwich. It does flick up a little bit here. I was a bit concerned about that, but once you get the motherboard in and put the screws in, everything falls into place. So there's the port conversion on the back. There's all the screws and everything all ready to go. So with the cables leaning over the side, let's get the ports all screwed back down. With the motherboard all installed, we're now going to get the heatsink screwed back in. So just be mindful just to keep those cables out of the way so nothing gets jammed in. Just return all their screws to the original top, and then it's the main body of the main circuit board of the N64 digital screws onto the top of there. You don't have to screw it in. You can use the double-sided tape if you prefer, or if you have to. Some of the models don't have these screws in, so sometimes you have to use the double-sided tape to secure the main body. Obviously my version being 8 allows me to screw the N64 digital in. The heatsink, I think it's nothing to worry about. The heatsink itself doesn't get particularly hot, so it isn't going to affect the operation of this board. So we need to lift the little anchor points that are on this board, which will allow you to then fit the ribbon cables. That one doesn't go in there, as I quickly realised. It goes in the other one. They're a little bit fiddly, especially with my great sausage fingers. I would have probably served me better to have fitted these cables before I fitted the board to the actual heatsink. I think it would have probably worked a lot easier. So it did a little bit of fiddling had to go on to coax these cables into place, but not the end of the world. I'm glad how it all sits in there. I think it all looks quite nice and neat, so I'm quite pleased with that. So pretty much, apart from putting the case and the covers back on, we are pretty much ready to go. One last look around. I think it's a nice neat job, well thought out. So just get this case on and we can start playing some games. It does make me laugh looking at modern consoles, how many screws hold these modern consoles together, and the way they're put together. Old consoles were much more easier to get apart than the new stuff. So it's off to playtime. We'll do some comparisons. So first up, we're going to take a look at this and do a direct comparison between the RAD2X and the N64 HD. My initial impressions to start with were that the N64 HD was a lot brighter. The snow seems more natural. The RAD2X does seem a little bit more grey and not quite as vibrant. But to be fair, there are a lot more options with the N64 digital. You can there is quite a good options menu to allow you to change resolutions, turn on different effects. So I am quite it's not really apples for apples comparison, but the N64 digital obviously I think does initially look a lot better, but for a convenience point of view, I think the RAD2X is definitely a lot more convenient. It plugs directly into the console with no modification and is a lot cheaper. The N64 HD is compatible with all the N64 consoles, NTSC and PAL. Supported resolutions 1080i at 60, and that's NTSC console 720 at 60. On the website it does say best compatibility for PAL consoles is 480 at 60 or 240 at 60, progressive scan. It's got integral 1:1 pixel aspect ratio, full colour non-linear, non-integral linear scaling, overscan for all selected modes. So VID blur, image brightness control, 3 pixel filter modes and 3 scan line modes, simple or hybrid, and obviously a savings menu. The VID blur, which creates a sharper image by attempting to remove the blur used in the original software. I must admit, so far I am actually quite impressed. It's a nice, easy solution for connecting to modern day consoles. There is talk about digital outputs being much more future-proof in the respect that you can connect other things like RetroTinks and things like that with HDMI inputs that they then can be scanned and upscaled and done other things later on as TVs progress. People are saying that we should be all going over to some form of standardised digital format, which I do like the idea of.
Open the wing.
But I'm actually quite pleased with this particular design and execution of the HD implementation of this on the N64. I think it's a nice colour representation. It works really well. These games really are fantastic, especially in this sort of non-blurry fashion that I do remember the N64 having. It's nice to see a sharper, more modernised console output. It certainly breathed a new lease of life into my N64, and it will be coming back to be one of my daily drivers, because there are some fantastic games on the N64 that I really did stop playing because I was just unhappy with the way that it looked. Especially Super Mario 64, it was always came across as being very blurred and murky. Now with these types of modifications, that side of the thing has gone. We're now playing things in a much clearer and much better manner, so it doesn't warrant me revisiting a lot of the games that I have had and played many years ago. So I'm really pleased to get that opportunity to see what they like in a more modern vein. Just going to take a quick look at Wave Race. I did just go through all the options on the option menu, looking at the different resolutions, to see basically which would look best for me. And it was a tie between the 480p and the 720p. 1080i and the particular monitor I was using weren't really giving me what I wanted, but overall I'd actually give this a good 9 out of 10. I am really pleased with it. I think it's breathed a new lease of life into my console. And I'm really pleased how simple the install was. So if you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye for now.